So today we're basically going to look at the root cause analysis, and I would say also a couple of methods to conduct the root cause analysis. So just to give you an outline of what's in today, we will be looking at the root cause analysis, why identifying root causes of problems is important. We'll be having a look at the 5 whys, at a few examples of the 5 whys. We'll be looking at the cause and effect diagrams, the reverse fishbone diagram, and then we will have a brief summary at the end. So moving forward, so when we look at root cause analysis, or RCA, what we're basically looking at is imagine, so I'll use the example of bike rides a lot today since it's one of my favorite sports. So imagine you fall off your bike and you have a very, very, very painful shoulder, for example. You could take paracetamol. Okay, but paracetamol would only at that point fix the symptom of the problem. Whereas if you'd go into hospital, you may find out that you actually have a broken arm or a broken shoulder. So that's what root cause analysis is all about. So we are looking at a problem, and root cause analysis gives us a range of tools, approaches, and techniques to uncover the root causes of a problem. So through the root cause analysis, we understand why a problem has occurred in the first place, and we try to understand the primary cause or primary causes of a problem. So through the method, we are enabled to find out what happened, why it happened, and of course, as a follow-up, we also look at reducing the likelihood that this problem will happen again. In root cause analysis, we will be looking at, through root cause analysis, we find 3 main types of root causes. That is physical causes, for example, that could be defective machinery, that could be broken machinery, that could be the floor of the industrial plant that may be broken, hence we have some problems. We have human causes. That could be, for instance, human error, maintenance not performed correctly, maintenance not performed at all, etc. And we have organizational causes. And one example is not having any clear processes in place. I'll also give you an example where we have a mix of human causes and organizational causes. So, for example, let's have a look at the wrong management styles being put in place. That's somehow an organizational problem, because probably there has been no adequate process, training, onboarding put in place. And of course, there's also a human cause. So the human cause that this manager is causing. So moving forward, in root cause analysis, we look at 5 main steps. The first thing that we look at is defining the problem. So actually understanding what problem we're looking at, and actually asking ourselves, is this a real problem? Because sometimes it may not even be relevant. Once we have defined the problem, then we look into collecting the data necessary for our inspection. Once we have collected the data, we try to identify the possible causes. And once we identify the possible causes, then we identify the root causes. Once we identify the root causes or the root cause, we evaluate the solutions and we solve the problem. So why is root cause analysis important? Well, first of all, we're trying to solve a problem, and solving problems is connected to organizational efficiency. Solving problems is connected to cost efficiency. And when we look at the root causes of a problem, we may also find out that this root cause solves many different problems. So I can give you an example in leadership consulting. So At times we have a problem employee that has got a spectrum of symptoms, so mainly connected to behavior, performance, and so on, teamwork. And we may find out that by drilling down the root causes of each of these symptoms, we may find out that the root cause is lack of motivation, is issues that this person may be experiencing at home. So through one or two root causes, we can solve and find the answers to the whole behavioral issues, to the whole range of behavioral issues. The most common tools, and these are the tools that we will be looking at today, is the 5 whys method and the fishbone diagram. There are further tools that we will be exploring in the future, and these tools are aimed at minimizing the need for root cause analysis in the future. So that's failure mode expectancy analysis and Kaizen, so FMEA and Kaizen. So let's look into another example of root cause analysis. So as I mentioned before, I'm really into bikes. So we have this example where we have, let's call him Tom. So Tom was in a bike race, and Tom did not finish the bike race. So, well, poor Tom, he didn't finish the bike race. And so what happened? So during the bike race, Tom got a flat tire. Okay, let's continue asking ourselves why, just to understand what the root cause is and just to understand what kind of solutions we can implement and how we can avoid this happening in the future. So we look at Tom. So he had a tire puncture, and we then look, okay, Tom, why did you have a tire puncture with your, let's say, road bikes? So we find out that Tom actually took a shortcut through the woods. And okay, things are starting to get interesting here. So okay, why did Tom look for a shortcut in the woods? We may drill down to understanding, hey, Tom actually has a lot of pressure for winning because his coach gives him a lot of pressure. And then if you go to why, then you may ask yourself, okay, but why does your coach give you so much pressure around finishing a bike race? And then you may find out that the coach has a salary, for example, that is based on the amount of races won. So through this root cause analysis, and then we can even go further. Okay, why is this happening? And we can look. Just a moment. So we can look more and more. And so digging down into the root causes, we'll then find out that, hey, there's a lot of pressure from behalf of the coach, and there's the need to change something here. So we will go into the solutions process with an example later on. So through the 5 whys, we systematically drill down on a problem. I'll be admitting new participants as we go. So I need a bit of patience from your end from this. Okay, so through the 5 whys, we systematically drill down a problem with the aim of finding the root cause or the root causes of the problem. And we also, these causes need to be related by asking the question why. And through asking ourselves why, we also find what relationship is between all these causes. So in a nutshell, the 5 whys is basically a system where we ask ourselves why 5 times until we find the real solution. Of course, we mentioned 5. So why 5? 5 is not empiric. So 5 is a good rule of thumb, but 5 is not the definite solution. So in general, you would find the real cause of a problem by asking yourself why between 3 and 7 times. If you need to ask yourself why less times, or if you need to ask yourself why more times, then there's a few questions that you need to ask yourself, because you're either not digging deep enough or you're digging too far. And as a rule of thumb, ask yourself why as long as you find solutions that are actionable. So if you ask yourself why repeatedly and you arrive to a solution that is totally out of your control, you arrive to a root cause that is totally out of your control, go back in the process. An example of this can be when you look at root causes that, for example, are connected to state or law, or when you look at root causes that are connected to the environment. So let's go back to the example of the bike race. So if drilling down with the root causes, you find out, okay, let's start with a new example just to make things easier. So John this time was in a bike race and he fell. So he fell. So why did he fall? He fell because his tire slipped on a curve. Why did his tire slip on a curve? Because the curve was wet. Why was the curve wet? Because it was raining. Why was it raining? Because the clouds were full of water, for example. Once you get to this stage where you're telling yourself, okay, because the clouds were full of water, you might want to look into solutions for this. But this is completely out of your control. And there's no viable solution that we can find to avoid this cause. So at this point, what we would do is we would go a step back and say, hey, John fell down because it rained. And at this point, you can find a solution connected to that. So a viable solution could be, for example, hey, next time, let's make an more accurate view of the weather forecast. Let's rely on different weather forecast providers. Let's, for example, use all-weather tires to be on the safe side. So at that point, there's a solution that's within your control. So this is just to give you an overview of how to behave when you reach solutions that are out of your control. And this generally happens when you ask yourself why more than 5 to 7 times, depending on the problem. And the fifth why is also used as a checkpoint for reflection. So as I was mentioning before, if you stray too much away from the fifth why, exactly, just ask yourself why. The 5 whys have got a range of benefits, and the top 3 are the fact that the 5 whys can be used in almost any situation. And this is something that we've seen basically now in our examples. So we don't necessarily need to be within a Six Sigma project. We can be in any real life situation. We can be working with a team in understanding why the morale of the team is low or why somebody has some complaints. You can be at home with your partner. You can be fixing your car. So you can use it within any environment. And it's a very simple tool, as we saw. We just need to keep a few points in mind. Let's look at another example. So here, yes, we have our police officer, and we have. So let's use Tim. So Tim, you meet Tim, and Tim is extremely frustrated. So you go to Tim and you say, hey, Tim, what's going on? And Tim tells you, hey, because of the COVID situation, you already know that my financial situation is really bad. And yes, I also have to pay a fine now, and I don't know how to get to the end of the month. And Tim is ranting and ranting and ranting out of frustration. You ask him, okay, Tim, so you paid this fine. That's not pleasant. but why did this happen? And he tells you, hey, look, I was late for work. Okay, Tim, come on, you're late for work. But why did this happen? And he says, hey, look, I woke up late. Okay, starts to get interesting. Why did it happen that you woke up late? Well, the alarm didn't ring. Well, Tim, come on. The alarm didn't ring. Those are basics. So what's your excuse here? So why did the alarm not ring? And well, actually, Diego, the alarm batteries were drained. So there is a reason why it didn't ring. Okay, interesting. Now that we know that the alarm batteries were drained, we can start seeking solutions. And in this specific example, there's a fifth why on top. So why was Tim frustrated? So in this specific example, we could go even deeper and deeper. So why were the alarm batteries drained? We could say, for example, because the battery technology in 2020 doesn't allow batteries to last more than a certain amount. But is that something within our control? No, we can find all the solutions in the world, but it's not something we can take action on immediately. And it's something we can definitely give feedback if we really are willing to who produces batteries. But at the same time, it's completely out of our scope, and it won't produce any positive results in the short run, because what we want is that Tim tomorrow is on time for work and so on. So let's look at potential solutions. And we have a myriad of potential solutions. I'll just go to the slide that we were looking at before. We have a myriad of potential solutions. So a solution could be, for example, have a backup alarm, use an alarm in a phone. A solution could be, hey, you know that your batteries are drained every 4 months, so put a calendar reminder every 3 months to change the batteries. Hey, why don't you get an electricity operated alarm clock? So we look at the potential solutions. And as we already saw in this specific case, we have a lot of solutions, and somebody may get overwhelmed. So Tim may be there in front of us completely lost. And Tim might say, hey, okay, thank you for all these solutions, but what should I do? You want me to have a phone, an alarm clock, you want me to change the batteries earlier. So, am I going to go crazy over this? So at this point, we would ask Tim what his priorities are. And based on these options, we would then act on the option that hits firsthand his main priority. So Tim at the beginning was explaining to us that he's having a hard time with work. He doesn't know if he's going to get to the end of the month. So one of the priorities that we could set is budget. And we know that Tim has a mobile phone and he has an alarm clock. So, hey, use your mobile phone as a backup. That's just an example. And of course, his priorities could also be, hey, my priority is absolutely never being late to work again. So at that point, we may also add a second security measure. So for example, he could buy a new alarm clock that works with batteries and has a backup with electricity, plus use his mobile phone. And how can we ensure that the problem does not reoccur in the future? Well, these answers all cover this point. The next area that we will visit is the cause and effect diagrams. In the cause and effect diagrams, we have so the cause and effect diagrams, first of all, are also called the Fishbone or the Ishikawa diagrams. And in a nutshell, through the cause and effect diagram, I'll just move over to the next slide, and then we may move back to this one. We see all the causes simultaneously. We have a good visualization for presenting the issues to stakeholders, because when we look at a brainstorming activity where we look for root causes and so on, the information may not be structured. And when we have a stakeholder meeting, what we don't want to do is just send out a sheet or a slide just full of text. So the Fishbone diagram is great in this area. And in terms of visualization, we also have I'll just go back to the previous slide. So we have the causes grouped up according to certain criteria. And this criteria changes from type of organization to type of organization. So here we are looking at the manufacturing industry, where we have the 5 M's. So in the manufacturing industry, we have manpower, man or woman power. We have machinery, we have material, we have the method, and we have measurement. One extra area that is often added is Mother Nature. I'll just like to explain this a bit more in detail. When we look so these are just a guideline, and we can of course tweak all these areas to our liking. I would recommend not to add too many areas, as this just causes confusion. So let's look at one of these areas. So the effect that we have is, why is a metallic substance in the product? Let's look at machines, for example. Machinery. So the machinery is basically, we can see here, so we see that the motors of the machinery is affected by rust. And as a consequence, could be the reason why there's a metallic substance in the product. And we have, for example, in the methods, there's an incorrect inspection procedure. We have under measurement, we have some issues, for example, with the sensors. With the manpower, we have some other issues, and so on. And we mentioned that as a rule of thumb, we have the 5 M's in manufacturing. In product marketing, for example, we have the 8 P's. The 8 P's are, for instance, and this is something that you'll probably relate to. So product or service, price, place, people, process, physical evidence, and performance. And in the service industry, we have, for instance, the surroundings, the suppliers, the systems, and the skill. As I previously mentioned, please don't take these 5 M's, 8 P's, or 4 S's as a rule of thumb. These are just guidelines and may or may not be relevant to your specific example. Just to see an illustration of this, if we go back to our fishbone diagram, we can see that, yes, there's Mother Nature, but there's no cause connected to Mother Nature. And in this specific diagram, we can very easily just cancel it out and make the diagram simpler. We, just to be complete on the topic, I'll also give a brief explanation of the reverse fishbone diagram. The reverse fishbone diagram is not as used as the standard fishbone diagram, and it's typically used for brainstorming the effects that we would have from introducing a change. And an example of this could be, for instance, we work in a customer service office, and we would like to introduce a change. And the change is, for example, when the customer service agent. So the change previously, when the customer called, a customer service agent was answering the call. Now the new change is, instead of the customer service agent answering the call, we will have a chatbot answering the call. So a standardized robotized voice that says, "Good morning, this is Invensis.com. How may I help you? For cancellations, press 1. For new bookings, press 2, etc." And we would like to understand, when we introduce this change, what could the potential effects be? So we introduce a chatbot, and we can still use the 5 M's, the 8 P's, or the 4 S's. And for example, one change. So let's look at the 5 M's, for instance. Or let's look at, actually, since it's customer service, let's look at the 8 P's under service. So we're looking at the service, and one of the 8 P's is process. So once we have a chatbot, yes, the process needs to be completely changed, because we can't use the processes that were in place until before then. The people. So the people is connected to, for example, our customer service agents. And one effect could be that they are less motivated. Or another effect could be that they take longer to deal with cases, because they're only receiving the more difficult cases, and the easier ones are handled by the chatbot. So this is a great tool to try and understand, hey, we're introducing this change, what could the effects be? And once we know the effects, we already know how to take action in order to introduce this change in the safest way possible. So wrapping it up, we had a quick look at the root cause analysis, why this is important. And by now, we know that we may have several problems, or we may have a big problem to deal with. And unless we dig into the root cause, we are not really solving the problem, but we're only solving one of its symptoms. One of the main methods that we have for the root cause analysis is the 5 whys, and that's asking ourselves why a certain problem has occurred, and drilling down between, I'd say, 3 to 7 times. 5 is a good rule of thumb. We have the Fishbone diagram that may support you in your stakeholder meetings, and that would help you in visualizing a bigger problem on one screen. And we have the reverse Fishbone diagram, where we can already predict the effects that a change would have. We already have one question. So Mrunali, thank you very much for your question. So the question is, could you please explain more about how to deal with human causes? Because according to me, it's quite difficult to handle. As a human cause, yes, human causes are definitely very difficult to handle. And I can give one example, because human causes may be many. And Mrunali, if you'd like to then drill down into one specific human cause that you'd like to discuss, please do write it in the questions box. A human cause is, so we are working in a manufacturing plant where we are constructing cars. And we find out that, okay, so I have a conflict due to insecurity. Mrunali, could you please drill down that? So conflict due to insecurity, are you relating, so are you referring more to non-confidence in dealing with the job? Or are you relating more to something else? And I'll just finish my example whilst I wait for your answer. So there could be the door handles that have not been installed correctly. And drilling down with the 5 whys, we actually find out that there's a lack of training from one of or from a whole area of the production plant. So if there's a lack of training, then we can say, hey, at this point, let's either train the whole department. Let's only train certain people. Let's train, for example, only on a certain area product, and so on. So this is one example of how we could tackle the human cause. It often drills down to training. It often drills down to another example could be, okay, so Mrunali, I'll cut my explanation. I'll go immediately to your follow-up. Insecurity regarding in getting credit on the job when more than 2 or 3 people are involved in the process. Okay, Mrinali, in this specific case, it's a human problem, definitely yes. And I would drill down and say, why is this insecurity in getting credit on the job when there are 2, 3 people involved in the process? So why is this happening? And it could be happening because there's a management problem, and because an effective management system allows everyone to get their credit for what they do. So if there's this insecurity, there's something going on. And what I understand here is basically people are trying to step on each other's feet, and this shouldn't happen, because if the management is working correctly, we're working in a collaborative environment, and we're working in an environment where the people don't have to fight to get the credit, and they don't have to make human error. I will move on to the other questions. So, okay, 5 why analyses. Only why should be asked, or combination of why and how can be used? My recommendation is to stick to why, because when you move over to how, you are basically straying away. So let's look at an example. So let's look at an example. So let's look at the bike ride. Let's look at the bike race. So we saw before an example where our friend took a shortcut because there was pressure from his coach. So in this specific case, you could ask how, how come, but this would throw you in different directions, whereas asking you why gives you a limited scope and makes you understand where exactly to stop. Because if you look at how, and in this example, it may not be 100% relevant, but from experience, when you look at how, you're only looking at ways to further down the analysis. And this is something that you don't want. Keep it simple. Ask yourself why a certain amount of times, maximum 5, 6, 7, until you get to an actionable point that's under your control. So I'll just scroll down. So, hi Diego, thanks for a great presentation. In which industry are these tools applied the most? How much of this is applied in software development delivery? So the 5 whys are mostly adopted in the manufacturing industry and are more and more being adopted in the service industry. When we look at software development and delivery, this is definitely a tool that we can apply, and is a tool that is applied, especially within the lean frameworks and within the agile frameworks. For example, I've worked as a consultant in one specific industry where during their retrospectives, it was working with a software development team. So during their retrospectives, whenever a problem came out, they actually stressed out in asking the 5 whys in relation to these problems. So yes, this is applied in software development, especially in companies that want to follow a lean and agile approach. So while framing 5 whys, is there any systemic way of framing our questions so that we arrive to the real root cause? Rule of thumb, ask yourself why. So, and something also to add is that the people in front of you need to know that you're applying the 5 whys, because asking somebody why more and more times may seem a bit intimidating. And I've been in situations where I was working basically together with a manager in his team who hadn't informed the team that he was actually using the 5 whys method. And at one point it came out, hey, what's going on? So they actually took this as a passive aggressive statement. Systemic way of framing our questions. I would say why and a follow-up of what happened before. So our friend Tim took the shortcut in his bike race. So, hey Tim, why did you take a shortcut in your bike race? So keep it simple. It's a very simple tool, and really keep it simple that way. And you'll see that you will always get to a solution. So the five from Usurayo. So the 5 whys technique could be used as a first step to strategic planning. Definitely yes. Definitely yes. Because if you have a problem, you want to start tackling the root causes. And this is something that I advise all the clients that I consult. Please don't start with a symptom, because you'll work on the symptom. And when you've worked on the symptoms, when you've spent so many resources on the symptoms, you'll find out that either the symptom is gone, but the root cause that you later found out is still there, or you'll just find out that you're not tackling the root cause. So I'll just look at... okay, so I think as far as it looks, the questions have all been answered. We still have a little bit of time. And please, also among the ones that asked me questions, if you feel that I haven't answered your question 100%, please let me know through the chat box. Because it's always difficult to receive one question and then answer it throughoutly without any follow-ups questions. Yes, the slides and the recording will be available to everyone. And you will receive exactly. So as Jaya mentioned, the recording of the session will be sent to everyone by email. And whilst I wait for other questions, yes, I'd just like to stress out, it's a simple method. Let's keep it simple. If you want to have fun with more complex methods, you will have lots of these in Lean and Six Sigma. So this is just a quick, snappy tool that you can use. And yes, so even if you are a people manager, I really recommend you to use it. Because you can basically, often you might have a problem in your team. So when I was leading teams, or now when I'm consulting on people management, you always have somebody in the team that's frustrated with the air conditioning. Then the next day, he or she doesn't like the food in the canteen. Then the next day, this person doesn't like the mouse that's uncomfortable. Then it's the seats. Then it's the too much noise from the hall. And in this case, as a manager, especially as a new manager, you can get completely overwhelmed and you don't know where to start, beating the bush. So by doing a root cause analysis, you might, and you will probably find out the root cause and the root cause may be only one or two that's connected to motivation, for example. So I have Julie Lau. So do you have value stream mapping webinars, Rohit? So this, there'll be a follow-up. However, these webinars will continue. So please do keep in touch follow the Invensis page and on LinkedIn, etc. And we'll give you some updates on this. So Julie Lau, both the root cause and symptoms can be solved within your control, but how do you make sure that you always arrive to the root cause when doing the 5 whys? So Julie Lau, how do you make sure that you arrive to the root cause? Try stressing the system. So go down through your 5 whys and get to the point where, by asking yourself why another time. So the root cause of the why is, for example, let's look at the bike race. So let's look at our friend who fell from his bike because there was wrong weather conditions. So once you get to the point where you understand, hey, I think the name was, let's say Jerry fell off the bike because it was raining. And why? Ask yourself why once more. Why was it raining? Because the clouds were full of water. There you get the hit in the head and you say, okay, this is too far. So let me go a step back, and that's where I can take action. So always try to stress the system with an extra why. And when you see that you can't move forward anymore, then move a step back. So can we give list of how to support to solve organizational causes being as junior rather than doing own work perfectly? Okay, this, if I understood the question right, and this is, I'll go, apologies, I'll go to the public questions. This was a private one. From where and when these tools for the root cause start? Once you have a problem. So once you have a problem, don't jump immediately in solving the problem, but try to understand the root causes of the problem. Try to understand, now we have very little time, but I'll try to give you one problem. So when these tools for the root causes start, for anything from an employee that's always late. If you work in software development, the software handed over to you cannot be read. Do you solve this problem just as it is? So do you try to fix this software, this code that cannot be read, these conventions that cannot be read? Or do you ask yourself why this happened and you try to solve the root cause? And you maybe find out that there's a process and so on that can be changed and can avoid all these kinds of problems in the future. So, exactly. So once you have a problem, just ask yourself why, try to find the root cause. And hey, you might even have a problem that is the root cause. So, it's always good to, just have this question, have this system method at the back of your mind. Venkat, when doing 5 why analysis, sometimes second, third whys are leading to actual root causes further, and sometimes it's based on assumptions. Also have more than one answer in second, third whys. How to deal with it? Okay, so when you do the root cause analysis, you might find that at one point you have a ramification. So you start to have roots to the 5 whys. Tackle the individual roots one by one. And hey, many times you'll find out that the individual roots have the same common root causes. Once you have the root causes, then prioritize the root causes according to your business requirements. That may be cost, that may be process, and so on. So thank you all for your questions.